Here we are looking at the centre section of the desk. We'll just look generally to start off with and then focusing a little bit. On the meter bridge at the top you can see the main meters and the long, very retro gooseneck microphone sticking out there, and several buttons at the bottom which we don't really use. The meters at the top left are the stereo out 1 and 2, and they're actually measured as ppm rather than VU. So you should be heading for a 4 if you're looking for your normal headroom, but I'm sure people will quite happily peak up to 6 or 7. And being as this is a classic NEVE with stacks of headroom, that shouldn't give you any problems at all. Below that, on the lower rack, you can see there's a lexicon effect unit at the top. We have a rollable mouse and keyboard which duplicate the computer operation, so you can actually operate the Macs from the centre of the desk. In the centre there is the SPL surround monitor controller. This controls the levels going to the Yamaha surround sound speakers, and you've got control over individual mutes and volume, etc. when you're using surround sound monitoring. On the left you've got the PreSonus single channel control, which has a fader, transport controls, and various other controls like pan, mute, solo and so on, which again is connected and can be used so that you can stay in the centre and perform some operations. Moving down we get the main section, which includes monitor sections, which includes talkback, and which also includes the master auxiliary send controls. I'll look at those in detail in a second. And then at the bottom we've got, on the fader pack, we've got the group levels and we've got the output levels. Starting with the faders, if you're monitoring in stereo, it is very important 1 and 2 are the normal stereo outputs. So you need to have these two blue faders up to maximum. 0 is at the top of the treble, as you can see, so these need to be up there. The group faders are only normally used for surround sound monitoring, and it's the first 6 that we use for that. So again, I would set these up to the 0 position, like so, and make sure they're on channel, and then these will feed directly to the SPL surround sound controller. As long as you've got the channels routed appropriately, you will then hear your mix in surround sound. This section here is to do with monitoring, the stereo monitors. We have 2 normal sets of monitors in the studio. We have the main Quested speakers and the near field Yamahas. This section controls the output to the Questeds, the main monitor if you like, and this section controls the output to the NS10s. The monitor switching can be a little confusing, but is okay as long as you are careful. This is the selection of what you're going to be listening to, and for most part you're going to just want to monitor outputs 1 and 2 from the faders, and there we have it there, output 1 and 2. You're going to monitor the level on the blue faders. That's the normal situation. However, you can also monitor the auxiliary outputs, or you can monitor external inputs, such as, for example, feeding in a CD player or tape player. So for example, we've got external 1, 2, external 3, 4, external 5, 6. These appear on the patch bay and you can plug in whatever you like. Also on the far side you'll see we've got external 7, external 8 as well. And this important button here, marked A and C, which actually stands for ancillary. When this button is pressed, then the center section comes into play, and this is where you've got all the auxiliaries 1 to 8 available, where you can actually check those back on your main speakers. If you want to hear the headphone mix on the speakers, you'd have to press ancillary here and choose 1 and 2 on the actual ancillary section here, but go back to 1 and 2 to get you back to speakers. Also, earlier on I mentioned that the AFL and the PFL come out through the small speaker on the console. You can choose to listen to the PFL here, but bear in mind, of course, that will cut out your stereo mix. So what that means is, to listen to a PFL or an AFL on your speakers, you're going to have to do 2 things. select the AFL or PFL on the channel you want, and then hit the PFL button in this center section here, and then remember to go back to output 1 and 2 when you want to hear the stereo mix. What's quite unusual about the loudspeaker level control is that we have two sets for the two sets of speaker, each with its own control. The great thing about that is that you can set the levels of the two speakers independently. So for example, when we're listening to the Questeds, there's a cut button here, which is why there's no sound at the moment. If I unhitch the cut button, I can adjust the level using the control, and interestingly it never goes off even when the control is at a minimum, so there's always signal there, which is intentional. It's not a fault. It's what NEVE called the confidence level, so that you know even if the level gets turned down to minimum, you'll still hear something there. Okay? If you wanted to stop, you press the cut button. Okay? And then on the alternative speakers, we've also got its own level and cut control. So to swap between them, you need to set the levels and then use the two cuts. And be careful not to hear both, because that would be weird. We also have a dim control, which just turns the level down. So it means that without having to adjust the control, you can talk to the band, say how great the take was, and then cut it back up again, or answer the phone to your manager, that kind of thing. There's also an AFL button which enables you to hear the AFL on the direct outs on the speakers. We have a row of buttons in the centre here that are not set up to do anything on this particular desk. So you don't need to worry about them, you don't need to touch them, and they won't cause you any problems. This is the talkback section. We've got talkback level. The talkback is through the gooseneck mic you saw earlier on. You've got individual buttons. The most important one is Q1 and 2 at the bottom here, because that's not the one that's normalised to the headphone amps. And what's useful about this particular switch is it's momentary if you pull it towards you, so it's just talking while I push the button, let go, and it's off. And then it stays on when you push it up, so that if you want to have a longer conversation, you can push it up. You don't have to keep your finger on it while you're talking to the band and tell them how great it was. Don't forget to switch it down when you then turn to the producer and say how rubbish it was. Here we have a test oscillator, which can be useful for lining up or just checking you've got signal. You can turn it on by switching it from the off position through different frequencies. It appears on the patch bay as oscillator output, and you can then patch it to a line input and use it as you see fit, and you've got a level control there. Beneath that, we have the signal threshold control. You remember on each channel we have a red signal threshold light which indicates when there's signal in the channels. This control alters what threshold those lights come on. And then we have the red A and B buttons that form part of the rudimentary auto mute section. To the right of that we have the master auxiliary send levels. So these can be really set and forgotten about. If you need extra level, you can boost it using those controls. Importantly, each one has an on button. We normally leave these on, which I recommend, because clearly if they're turned off you won't get any auxiliary sends working.